Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judy, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the 14-Yard NFL Podcast.
Isn't it good to be back, fellas? I tell you what, all this off-season I've talked about, I'm not really feeding it. The NFL's back, whoopie-doo. Took about 5 minutes after 6 o'clock yesterday, and I was back into it big style. Welcome, everybody, to our review of week number 1 of the NFL season. Let's welcome the boys in tonight. Josh, how you doing, pal?
I'm great, mate. Yeah, I was the same as you. Pretty much as soon as 6 o'clock's rolled around, I'm on a train from Euston back to Birmingham to see you and some of the other lads down at Walkabout for our meetup. And I am using 4G internet, of which if you use it nowadays to try and stream anything, you'll realise that it is the slowest and most bittiest thing imaginable. Trying to squint at Jacoby Brissett making like a 2-yard pass. And I've got that on a packed train for like 2 hours before I'm able to actually see. I got there for half time, thank God, but no, all worth it in the end. And isn't it just so good to have the NFL back? It's just great.
It is indeed, mate. It really is. Steve, how you doing, pal?
Yeah, as soon as the inactives come out, as soon as the teams start releasing all of their inactives for the game week about an hour and a half beforehand, that's when you know it's back. That's when you know it's coming. And all of the social pages and all of the content starts coming, and you know that game week is almost upon us. And then when those glorious moments when Scott Hansen says his line, and then we're back in for 7 hours of ad-free football, ladies and gents. And boy, what a 7 hours it was.
It really was. For me, though, before we jump on, just coming on to, when it feels real. For me, it's the CBS music. It's never changed. It's always the same. And that theme, as soon as it comes on for the first time in what feels like 7 years, you think, oh, yes, there we go. Just feel that. That should be my ringtone going forward, because it just unbridled joy hits the face.
Yeah, I did have that as my ringtone once upon a time, so there's a story for you. Yeah, you should definitely download it, mate. But yeah, like you say, we are back to review all of the week's actions. We're actually back live, so if anybody is listening along, watching along live, welcome in. By all means, interact with us. We'll pop your comments up on the screen. If you've got any questions, we'll try and take them as much as we can. So yeah, looking forward to interacting with everybody over the course of the season. But we've said, fellas, in general terms, it's great to have football back. Lovely to have it back. Steve, give us one thing in particular you really loved this week.
Oh, I mean, where else is there a star other than just the absolute chaos of it all? There was about 800 missed kicks. There was touchdowns aplenty. There was a game that felt like it was being played in a lake in Chicago. Just absolute chaos. This is what we love. This is the drama and the intensity and the madness that we love in the NFL. And there was just so many storylines. There wasn't any real blowouts. There was no teams that really ran away with it, really. And there was no teams that there was a few teams that looked pretty bad, but there was no teams that really stank out the place. I felt like most of the teams in the NFL gave a fairly decent account of themselves, and there's some really, really good and really high scoring games in there as well. And I think what week 1 really showed was just how much quality there is in the league as well. There was a few players that really went off. Some of the wide receivers really, really went off and had some big, big days. Guys like Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson had himself a day. AJ Brown of the Eagles had himself a real day, which I read the stat that not including rookies, it's the most receiving yards any player's ever had on a new team in the history of the NFL on his debut. So, some real incredible performances out there in week 1, but just the chaos of it all. But just when you thought another kicker couldn't miss a kick, the red zone would clip to another game, and there'd be another kick lining up, like a chip shot, like a 23-yarder, and they'd shank it right, and you'd be like, "How have you missed that?" The Tennessee one for me Like they get 2 defensive penalties to keep the drive going to end the game. They're down 21-20. All they need to do is a quick chip shot, and he shanked it, and they lost the game to the Giants. I could not believe it. But there was plenty of them. There was some successful kicks, as you guys will be very, very pleased with. That one from Cade York was an absolute missile to win the game. But there was also some very, very unsuccessful kicks, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But wow, what a week of action to come back to.
Yeah, it certainly was. He's kind of sat on the fence a bit there, Josh. I said give me one thing, and he's reeled off several, and I can't disagree with any of them, to be fair. He's pure chaos. It's pure madness. It's why we love it. But give us a moment, mate, from your weekend. What did you love from the NFL?
Yeah, I was going to say, did he actually leave anything for the rest of us to pick up there? I've got my 3 options here, and I'm like, right, that's the first one gone, and then I'm like, it's all right. You can only talk about one. Second option, and then the third option. Thinking, well, there's 2 of you, and there's 3 options. No, for me, I mean, again, I lean into the chaos. But it's the fact that so many games went late, so many games went deep. 5 games were decided by either a game-winning score within 2 minutes of regulation or went to overtime. That's tied for the 3rd most in a week 1 ever in the NFL. And if you look at who did it, so Cleveland with the last 10 seconds against Carolina, Pittsburgh getting the win against Cincinnati, the Colts and Houston tying. Who on earth saw that one happening? And when you consider as well that Indianapolis, and in fact the next 2 teams that are rail off as well, New Orleans beating Atlanta and the Giants beating the Texans, those 3 at the end, those 3 games are part of 4 games that overcame 10+ point deficits to win or tie. That's massive. And when you consider the fact that Carolina also came back from a 14-point deficit as well to a 13-point deficit to go ahead just before Cade York's winner as well. Games are running deep in week 1. Week 1 you usually get the odd blowout, you get the odd real mismatch game, which, to be honest with you, some of these might well be the case, but you don't usually see them come up really close like this. And going on to Red Zone, I mean, we were watching Red Zone after celebrating our victory, and then straight away there's action to come up straight away with a game-winning kick, or there's been another miss, or a touchdown's just happened to bring the game level, etc. What a night! What an advert for the NFL! If someone brand new was brought into the sport yesterday and was just sat down in front of Red Zone, you've got a fan for life there. Just get them a team. That's all that would be needed.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I say, really difficult to disagree with both of the points that you both made. I'll be a little bit more specific, and I'll give you one from me, and that's a welcome back to Michael Thomas. Yeah. Michael Thomas. We talked about Justin Jefferson and Adams and all of these wide receivers. I'd forgotten about Michael Thomas, genuinely forgotten that the bloke existed. It's been 2 years nearly now since he's actually been on the field. Last time he was consistently on the field, he was breaking the NFL receptions record. And his stat line yesterday wasn't particularly one that jumps off the page, certainly in comparison to some of the ones that Steve mentioned when he was talking about it. But to actually firstly just see him back on the field and secondly make the plays that he did, his final stat line, 5 receptions, 57 yards, 2 touchdowns. 3 of those 5 catches were absolute highlight reel plays. His 2 touchdown grabs were fantastic. The first one, excellent use of the feet and good body control. The second one, he uses his body to shield the defender. It's a brilliant back shoulder throw from James Winston to find him. But again, he controls the ball all the way down to the ground. And then he ran a fade route, which was brilliant down the sideline, got some separation, clung that one in on his fingertips. If he can get anything like back to the player that he was, we've already talked about this New Orleans team potentially being a little bit of a dark horse. I know some people have actually got them potentially as divisional favourites. But certainly if they can keep this level of play up from that wide receiver core. Jarvis Landry had an excellent debut for them yesterday, 7 for 114 for Jarvis. Chris Olave is obviously coming as a rookie. They'll be expecting more contributions from him throughout the course of the season. But like I say, it was just great to actually see him back on the field. You actually forget about how talented this guy is. And like I say, what an absolute weapon he certainly can be, and an extra dimension to that New Orleans passing attack that, like I say, it's been missing for the last couple of years. We always do it though, fellas, and everybody's been doing it today. All of your American talk shows and your sports radio coverage. It's always known as Overreaction Monday, isn't it? Week one, everybody overreacts, and I'm going to do exactly that. I've made 3 convincing arguments to myself today, and we'll go through them chronologically. We'll have a bit of a conversation about all of them. Now, you may well think that these have got no chance of happening. You may well tell me that I'm completely overreacting. But I picked out 3 statements from my thought process this morning. We're just going to have a bit of a chat about them based on what we saw yesterday. So the first argument I've got is that the Cowboys will finish last in the NFC East because they were absolutely dreadful last night. And with Dak Prescott being injured, they're only going to get worse. We'll then talk about the horrendous conference that is the AFC South that somehow managed, even with an inter-conference game, to end up with no winners this weekend, which has surely got to be an unbelievable stat on its own that that's actually happened. But all of those teams either losing or tying with each other. So could we actually see a divisional winner with a sub-500 record? And then the final one is Aaron Rodgers, for me, will finish this season with a career low sub-20 touchdown passes. His lowest in his career when he's played the full season has been 25. I think he goes lower than that because who on earth is actually catching that ball in Green Bay? Because there was nobody catching it yesterday, that's for sure. So they're my 3 overreactions to week 1. Jen, Steve, take us through the NFC East, mate, because your boys got a nice win to open up the season, although that ended up being a little bit tighter than you may well have wanted to. But let's talk about the Cowboys. I think they're going to finish last in this division, mate.
I think I can see it. I mean, obviously, it doesn't. Everyone else in the division won a game, which in the NFC East doesn't happen very often. So the fact that like I said, the Giants beating the Titans was a shock to me. I didn't see that coming, and I think they tried their best to lose it. Daniel Jones was not great in that game, but they came away with the W, and the Dallas going to week 2, the only team on 0-1. You're always going to say that the Bucs are a tough opponent. While Tom Brady was out there, 45-year-old Tom Brady, the first time ever there's been a 45-year-old starting QB in the NFL. He wasn't incredible, but had the fact that he's 45, he looked like a younger version of himself for sure. But I think what's really concerning with the Cowboys is, there was a lot of talk last year about their defense and how, guys like Trayvon Diggs and Micah Parsons were going to carry that defense this year if they can keep playing like they did. But no one really focused on their offense. And we talked about this a little bit in the offseason about how, they lost Amari Cooper, a couple more pieces on offense left in free agency. And now you've got an offensive line that is weaker. La'el Collins is a big loss. Tyron Smith has got a big injury and he's going to be out for I think 8 to 10 games, something like that. So that's 2 big pieces gone. And I think whilst that Cowboys O-line over the last couple of years has been good, it's not deep. So that O-line has been rejigged, and I just don't think they really have an answer for it. And I think what it's shown us so far, and again, it's week 1. Everything we say after week 1, you have to take it with a pinch of salt because it's week 1 and teams are still trying to figure everything out. But if we're going to have some crazy reactions, this Cowboys offense, when that O-line is bad. Like you said, Dak Prescott looked poor and will now be out for, I think, 4 to 6 weeks. I think one of the NFL analysts have got it at. There's something to do with his thumb, almost 2 years to the day since he had that awful ankle injury. So yet again, Dallas is going to be without starting QB for a number of weeks. I've read literally 20 minutes ago that their plan is to go with Cooper Rush, who, is, as far as backups go, he's hardly lighting the field of light, is he? Last year the offense was good enough to carry Andy Dalton tried his best to be awful last year, but the offense was good enough to carry a backup quarterback through. That offensive line was good. You had the 1-2 punch of Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, and then you had that amazing wide receiver trio. Now 2 of the 3 wide receivers are gone. CeeDee Lamb, had some flashes in the game, but he can't do it all himself. Zeke's a year older. They don't have Dak as the main man. And how does that offense come back from that? They looked toothless. They scored 3 points, no touchdowns at home. And to top it all off, their fans were throwing stuff at Dak Prescott as he ran down the tunnel. Dallas fans were throwing things at Dak.
Oh, I've just seen it. I've literally
Just
just taken a
wow.
look on Twitter. It's the first thing I see. Oh,
It's week
wow.
one,
that's
guys.
awful.
It's week one. But yeah, and I think you look at the some of the games that potentially the Cowboys are gonna be without Dak Prescott for. Next week they have Cincinnati, tough game, and then they've got a divisional game. They go up to MetLife to play the Giants, and then another divisional game against Washington, and then they host the Rams. Sorry, they go to the Rams, and then they go to Philadelphia. So there's all three divisional games within the first 6 weeks of the season, and you imagine Dak Prescott's going to be out for all of those. Can they win any of those games without Dak? You've got to be looking at the New York and the Washington games as the games where they can pick up wins. And if this Dallas team starts 2-4, are they going to come back with that? When how long is Dak going to be out? We don't know. But even when it showed last night, even when Dak's in, it's still not a sure thing that they're going to be winning the division. So yeah, I think it's interesting that they certainly could go finish bottom of the division. I think that's an interesting take.
Yeah, Josh, I'll pose the question to you in a slightly different manner. Is it a ridiculous take in as much as you just don't have enough confidence in the other teams in the division? Because I think Steve's summarised it quite well there. This team, you look at it, not a lot of weapons there outside of CD Lamb. He had 11 targets yesterday and only caught 2 balls. I think everybody knows that you're just going to double team CD Lamb and essentially that's the offense taken care of. There's a lot of hype about Tony Pollard. There always seems to be hype about Tony Pollard, but he's been there now 3-4 years. He's never had a big role. He had 6 attempts yesterday, managed 8 yards with a long of 9. So it tells you all you need to know about the amount of tackles for a loss that he suffered because of that offensive line having more holes than a sieve, as Steve has quite rightly said. So is this take more to do with the fact that you just think it's a weak division that you initially would sort of turn your nose up at it to think, now there's no way that's going to happen, as opposed to this Cowboys team actually giving you confidence?
I mean, first of all, can we not hit the panic button on this just yet?
No, it's week one. We're going to overreact, mate. That's what it's all about.
Look, I can understand the panic button existing, but just because it's big, it's shiny, and it's red does not mean that we have to press it. But just to explain my thinking, first of all, if you didn't have this as a blowout victory for the Bucs and you've just not been paying attention, this was always going to be a bit of a rout for the Bucs, and I actually think that Dallas, for at least a fair bit of it on defense, if nothing else, actually did stand up and was counted a little bit. So I do think that they give you at least some hope that if you can just get something going, they're going to have to rejig their identity slightly to be able to cope for the fact that they're going to now be headed up with, I can't believe I'm saying this, with Cooper Rush for 2 months. It's 7 to 8 weeks, apparently. Dak Prescott suffered a Bennett fracture on his hand. And seemingly the injury looked flipping benign at the time. It was a hand tip. It was like a hand hold almost. And yet that's got him out for 2 months. But if you actually go through who they've got over those 2 months, like Steve suggests, let's take a quick look at it. So Bucs, I had that as the Bucs all day long. Bengals, Dallas, I had that as Bengals all day long. Then you've got the Giants and the Commanders, of which, those are the games which you need to be able to step up with. But realistically, you're probably looking at similar level teams at this point now, if you take the QB away. So that's at the very least a 50-50 shot. And then you've got the Rams, the Eagles. Those I had as victories against. And then the Lions and the Bears, and then a bye week. So there are 4 winnable games there that take you to 4-4. I had them as 4-4 in any case. So let's say they go 3 and 5, or even 2-6. They could still well be on for 8 to 9 wins on the return back. Of which, do you think that Washington's going to get anywhere near 6 games? Even, do you think that the Giants are going to get anywhere near 6?
The thing is, I mean, I don't mean to turn this into a sort of an anti-Dallas segment, but let's not pretend that all is well in Dallas. I've just read that they've obviously got Dak under contract with this enormous contract, $45 million. They're 29th in cash spending this year. 29th. You've got the guy in the building. You've got the man that you're building the right franchise around. You're not spending any money to put any weapons around him. So this is what's going to happen when that guy goes down. You haven't got the roster. I would argue that New York and Washington's rosters are not too far removed from Dallas. I thought New York and Washington actually added some decent pieces in the offseason. But let's not pretend that Dallas is just going to go 4-4 or even 3-5. And it's
no, absolutely not. But let's not pretend that Washington and New York are actually great shakes at the moment. Even with the Giants winning on Sunday, they did not look great. And Washington limped to that win.
Yeah, of course. And I'm not saying that either of those are going to be sort of divisional winners. I think it's going to be a dogfight in the NFC East, as it always is. But then off their bye week, they go to Green Bay and then to Minnesota. Well, that's two really tough games to come off the bye week where Dak might be back and playing his first games potentially of pretty much of the season again. So that's two really tough games to come back to. And I'd be a bit concerned if I was a Dallas fan, just because where do we go from here? And I think questions, if they get to week 9 and they're, let's say, 2-6 at week 9 on the bye week, questions being asked of Mike McCarthy: does he get a free hit because Dak's gone down? Like, does Dak's gone down? Sorry, we can't do anything with the head coach. I think Dallas fans are a bit bored of the mediocrity that McCarthy offers. And you look at some of the rookie head coaches around the league. I think of the 8 of the 10 were in action red zone. I think of the 8, something like 5 of them won. Rookie head coaches. So rookie head coaches are doing well around the league, and Mike McCarthy sat there stealing a living. So
I don't think Jerry Jones is in the business of excuses, to be honest, especially at this point.
Definitely not.
And he's definitely someone to throw someone else under the bus. Don't get me wrong. When I say what I say, I don't mean that the Cowboys' lifestyle currently is very rosy. I think that before the season even started, questions were raised about their roster, the future planning, the fact that Mike McCarthy is on thin ice, all the rest of it. I look at Washington and New York and I see 5 to 6 wins each. Yeah. I think that Dallas still have enough, especially with the running after those games which you mentioned after the bye. There's 5 winnable games there with Dak, easy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, after that, it's a case of the answer here isn't are they going to get into the playoffs. The question here is, are they better than Washington and New York even still now? And that's with 2 months of somebody else coming in. I say yes.
We shall wait and see. I'm still fairly convinced with my argument that, I think the Cowboys are pretty poor, I've got to say, and we'll wait and see. But, I think you've just answered my question to you at the end there, Josh. I think it's more your confidence or lack of confidence in the others than any confidence you've actually got in the Cowboys. You said don't panic, so I'm going to put you on the hot spot then and let you try and make 4 franchise fan base who panic, because I don't think any team in the AFC South is going to end up with a winning record. What say you?
I found some red here. I'm not pressing the panic button. My finger's over it, but I'm not pressing the button. No. Look, week 1 throws up all sorts of nonsense, right? It happens every year. And evidently, you've come up with some good ones here, to be fair. This is one where it's going to be close. Before the start of the season, I did my run through of every team's predictions, and stupidly enough, the first game of the season, I had Indianapolis and Houston tied. I don't know why I put it. I seriously don't know why I put it, but it's there. It's there. I have the Colts at 9-7-1 for some random reason, and the Titans at 10-7, of which it wasn't the Giants that they lost to, but it was somebody equally terrible. I think I had them losing a game to the Texans at some point. So I'll just switch that around. So I still have 2 teams with winning records here. It's going to be close. It's going to come down to within a game or so, but I have faith that the Titans, who were the number 1 seed in the AFC last year, let's not forget, I think that a lot is said about their current predicament, but even with a crap hand last year, they still ended up with the top seed in the conference. I think that a little bit more respect needs to be put on the name. It was the Titans were comfortable until they weren't. It was a shock and a real punch to the mouth, the fact that the Giants even got close, let alone won that game. I'm not pushing the panic button on this one, and I don't think that anybody else should either.
Steve, what say you, pal? Do you reckon any of them end up with a winning record? I mean, from what I saw, I think the Colts looked pedestrian, to say the least. Matt Ryan's longest throw went for 28 yards on the day. We've said, the Colts seemingly have tried this now for the last 3 or 4 years, haven't they? They've brought in different veteran quarterbacks, and essentially, they're all aging and they're at that stage of the career where the previous franchises wanted to move on for them for some reason. So why the Colts think they're the answer, who knows? Obviously, Jonathan Taylor's going to get his yards. He looked as good as ever yesterday. But we said all off-season long, didn't we? There's not much there in terms of the passing game, in terms of receivers to throw to, outside of Michael Pittman, who had himself a nice enough day. I think elsewhere in the division, you'd look at it, Tennessee, we've said, lost a lot of pieces throughout the course of the season. The A.J. Brown trade was huge. And obviously, when you look at Houston and you look at Jacksonville, you're just assuming that they're teams that are in rebuilding mode. Although, again, I've got to say, impressed with some of the bits and pieces I saw again from Davis Mills yesterday. That team seemingly a lot more competitive than people want to give it credit for. And the O.J. Howard pick-up potentially is a shrewd piece of business. So what do you say, mate, in terms of the AFC South overall?
It's like when Andrew Luck retired, he cursed the Colts because they just don't seem to be able to get over the hump. The last time the Colts won a season opener, Jonathan Taylor was in 8th grade. That's how long it's been since the Colts have won a season opener. And yesterday, if I'm a Colts fan, I'm worried about how they played yesterday. That O-line was dreadful. And for an O-line, for a Frank Reich team, or an O-line where you've got guys like Quentin Nelson, that's they're supposed to be a good, solid O-line. Frank Reich comes from the school of Andy Reid, where they build in the trenches and they shore up the quarterback. Matt Ryan had no time at all, and even Matt Ryan looked nervous. And that's not something you associate with 37-year-old veteran Matt Ryan. The Colts alarmed me yesterday. They didn't look like a team that could take this AFC South crown comfortably. We talked in the offseason, I think, in this is one of those divisions where there's 2 good teams and there's 2 bad teams. I think we all are comfortable with the idea that the Jaguars and the Texans are going to be the bottom dwellers, and the Colts and the Titans are going to be the ones fighting it out. But after yesterday, I don't know if that holds true anymore. I think the Jaguars had moments, and I the Doug Peterson factor aside, I sort of want the Jaguars to perform because Trevor Lawrence was in college for what felt like about 8 years. He finally came to the NFL. He gets drafted by the bloody Jaguars, and it feels like his career might be a bit wasted. And I really hope he does come good. And they added so much talent, but they look like they've got a lot of things to work on, and things just weren't quite clicking for them yesterday. Had a couple of good players, but the things weren't quite clicking. And even then, Trayvon Walker had a lovely interception from Carson Wentz. That was such an athletic play, and I thought Carson Wentz was going to do his best to give his best Carson Wentz full experience for the Commanders on his first start for them, but he got the job done with some lovely throws, I must say, as well. So the Jaguars will be the Jaguars. The Texans are one of these teams, I think, like the Lions. Obviously, watching the Eagles yesterday, I got to see the Lions. The Lions are one of these teams where no one really expects anything of them. They've got a young team. They've got a new head coach, and they're all playing for him, and they're playing hard. And I think that's exactly what the Texans were doing yesterday. And I think their defense looked good in spurts. I think they really upset that Colts O-line. And I think the Texans almost deserved to win the game. It's almost a shame they didn't. And once again, tie should be banned. Tie shouldn't be allowed. I'd like to say,
a great tie is to be appreciated.
Not allowed. And then you come to the Titans, who threw it away in the last moment against the Giants of all teams. I think it is week 1 jitters. I think someone will come back. You look at the run-in last year when the Colts almost gave the Titans a run for their money in the end of it. I think these 2 teams, there's too much talent in the rosters for one of them not to come good. But rather than none of them finishing with a positive record, what I would push it back to you, Shaun, and ask you: do you think one of either Vrabel or Frank Reich would be fired before the end of the season? Because these are 2 teams where they're constantly competing for that AFC South title, but neither of them does anything beyond that. And I think are they then going to be? Is this the time? Is it time? There was talk of Frank Reich last season. There was talk of it not, and they managed to pull it all together. Could this be the season? Could this be the one? The Titans were the AFC number 1 seed last year.
Yeah, Josh is determined not to push this panic button.
I'm actually pushing it.
Oh, you're actually pushing it.
I'm pushing it for Vrabel.
Yeah, look, I think it could be either of them. I genuinely do. I think Steve raised a really valid point there because, like you said, they're not going to be. I don't think they're going to have a poor season to a sort of 4-13 type level that's just going to get them fired based on the record in the season. I think, like you say, that the level of expectation is that these sides should be making the playoffs. They should be having deep postseason runs, and neither of them you would look at the minute and have any confidence that they're going to be able to deliver on that. The Titans, yes, they were the number 1 seeds last year, but obviously got dumped out in the first round that they entered into the playoffs. They never convinced anybody as the number 1 seeds heading into it last postseason. So yeah, I could certainly see that happening. Just a couple of shout outs on a couple of the games yesterday whilst we're talking about them. Welcome back Saquon Barkley as well. Massive return from injury for him yesterday. Great to see. And take a bow, take Crowder, because my word, did he light up Derrick Henry on one of those hits. We normally see the Derrick Henry highlight reel of him sending somebody else flying, but he actually took a hell of a hit. So yeah, really good win for New York. Brian Daboll, dance all night, my friend. That's all I can say. That was a proper dad dance in the locker room as well. Really enjoyed seeing that because that was a ballsy call as well in your opening game as a head coach to go for that 2-pointer. There were plenty of kicking issues yesterday, but many a coach would have took the safer option of trying to kick the PAT and play for overtime. Fair play to Daboll. He grabbed the ball by the horns and obviously got his just rewards. The final one then, fellas, and I'll walk us through my thought process for this one, is Aaron Rodgers is going to have a career low year. His current low is 25 touchdown passes on a season. That was on a 16-game season. This is obviously a 17-game season, which it was last year. He only actually played in 16, though, again, because he obviously had already locked up the number 1 seed. But this is a passing attack that, oh my word, what is this passing attack? Who is actually going to catch the ball in Green Bay? Christian Watson, there was a lot of talk coming out of the draft about, was it a bit of a reach? And my word, he dropped an absolute doozy of a touchdown, didn't he? He was walking into the end zone, but he let the ball slip through his fingers. We've often seen this from Green Bay where, Aaron Rodgers has basically just looked at Devontae Adams for an entire game because he's had no faith and no trust in anybody else that's been there, whether that be Valdez-Scantling, whether that be Alan Lazard, whether it be Amari Rodgers, who they drafted last year and obviously never really worked him into the offensive game plan. You look at what he's working with this year, you got Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson taken in the draft. They combined yesterday for a grand total of 6 receptions for 69 yards between them, which just isn't going to get the job done. They abandoned the running game. Aaron Jones only ended up with 5 carries for 49 yards. These stats annoy me when I see such an efficient running game that he's averaging a first down every time the bloke touches the ball, yet you're only giving him 5 times. Winds me up something rotten. But I think, again, there are serious issues here for Green Bay. The offensive line is banged up. Don't know how long that the tackles are going to be able. Bakhtiari was obviously missing again yesterday. I think there was also an injury on the interior of the line. Rodgers was seemingly pressured a lot. He took 4 sacks, some big sacks as well. Zadarius Smith seemed to really be up for it yesterday. From a Minnesota perspective, there was one hit where 4 Vikings converged on Rodgers, and it was a horrible looking hit. And all joking aside, if that's the level of protection he's going to get, it may well be a career low in terms of touchdown passes because he just won't be on the field for a full season because he'll be missing time injured. It does, really play into it. So a really disappointing outing for Green Bay, 7 points. It should be pointed out that actually this is the 4th season now of Matt LaFleur, and they've scored 3, 3, and 7 points in week 1s through his tenure. So, Josh, probably get your panic button ready because I know you're going to tell me to calm down and Aaron Rodgers is going to be fine, right? But, he's pressing it. Go on then, mate. Tell me I'm right. Aaron Rodgers, tell me I'm right. This is a shocking passing offense, isn't it, mate?
It was epitomised in the first half with that Watson that Watson TD reception that never was. So we're in walkabout. I think you went to get a drink, or you were consoling some poor Bengals fans at this point. And I'm looking at it, and I'm actually, clapping this touchdown that definitely happened, because Watson even almost has like a little swagger. You know how like some players slow down as they get to the end zone, and do a little bit of a, they get something a bit on. So I'm there thinking, God, this is a guy that's just come in and he's swaggering in front of Vikings fans. This is low key dangerous. Turns out he never had the ball in his hand. Like what? But I think at that point, and then you start seeing Rodgers get incredibly irate. Apparently, all that ayahuasca wasn't enough to keep him level and zen during the game, because pretty much all that he did was piss and moan on the sideline. It's very obvious that the Packers O-line is not as good as it has been in previous years, and because you don't have the wide-out attack of which you have in previous years, he's having to hold on to the ball for longer, which means he's making worse decisions as well. I think it was one of the worst games I've seen Rodgers play in a long time. There is a caveat with the panic button, though, which is that the Packers got absolutely creamed in their first game last year as well against the Saints, and then came back and was on perfect form. However, this is not the same Packers team. At least in that first week, you got to see some sort of sprouts of, at least something working in their favor. There was nothing to celebrate in that game yesterday. It's dangerous. And when we're talking touchdown passes, of which is your actual prediction here, I actually think that Green Bay are going to have to run it into the end zone a lot more, because I don't think you can trust these wideouts. I don't think you're going to be able to trust them on these fades or anything like that when they get really low down. It's going to have to be with feet. So, yeah, you give me a nice wide berth with 20 touchdown passes here. And yeah, I'd stick with you on that one. I'll hit the panic button.
20 sounds really low, but when you think about it, this is a guy that regularly puts up 30, 35.
Now, here's a guy.
Yeah, here's a guy. Exactly, yeah. But he does consistently put them up. But Steve, you probably saw obviously bits and pieces of this one in the light window as well yesterday. What was your take on it? Because, again, like I say, you almost expect Green Bay to find the answers. But again, it's similar to what I said about Dallas. The name sort of makes you think they will get it sorted, but you just look at the actual roster and you think, well, how are they going to get it sorted?
I don't know how Watson didn't catch that ball. It was harder to not catch it than to catch it. I don't know how he didn't catch it. Like I was the same as you, Josh. I was watching it. I was like, "That's a lovely touchdown," and it just goes straight through his arms. And I was like, "I don't know how are you?
How long did it take you to realize it?" Because for me, it was like the next play, and I'm like, "Why are they lining back up?"
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I think with this, it's one of those pump the brake situations, because this has happened before, and this is just how Green Bay works. Now, obviously, the big difference this time around is they haven't got Devontae Adams to bail them out of it all, and they also haven't got Marcus Valdes-Scantling to bail them out either. So there's two big, it wasn't just the Devontae Adams show. Like he was a big part of it, but they've also lost Valdes-Scantling, who was another one of his go-to guys. Now, one of the big things to remember is that Alan Lazard didn't play. He was a last-minute call, didn't play, had an ankle injury, and that's a big loss for Green Bay. Like he's their number one guy this season. He didn't play. What is baffling is the fact that their leading receiver was AJ Dillon, not even one of the wide receivers or even a tight end. It was AJ Dillon. Now I know the running game in the NFL is evolving, and a lot of teams now use the running backs as this Swiss Army knife of, they've got to catch the ball and they've got to run with it. So I get that they use Dillon, and he is that kind of back. He's a really good sort of multi-tool back. But to be the leading receiver in a game like this is worrying. And I think this, to flip it over, I'm not ready to call time on the Packers just yet. I think they will get it together, and I think Rodgers is too good to not, and also Matt LaFleur as well. I think Matt LaFleur is a great head coach. I think they're too good to not get it together, and I think these receivers will come good. I think that stat you said, Shaun, about how how they've scored like 3, 10, and 7 points in their week 1 games under Matt LaFleur is important. Like, they take time to get going, and these receivers, they're all new. They're going to take time to learn Rodgers' way of playing and what he expects of them. I think they will come good. One thing I will say, just quickly to flip it over, what an entrance from Minnesota. This was a statement game from Minnesota. This was we are free of the years of defensive coordinating and our head coach being a defensive guy. They bring in an offensive-minded head coach, and wow, did they let loose. Kirk Cousins looked like a man transformed. Justin Jefferson was so good. I saw a tweet yesterday from one analyst saying that he will be the highest paid receiver in the league at some point in the near future, which he probably will be. He was excellent. Because Justin Jefferson was so good, he was opening up the box to allow running lanes for Cook. Like, that offense was so multidimensional. That Vikings team really tore apart Green Bay. And I think that's a statement win. And a lot of people, I remember watching Good Morning NFL with the football show, and one of the guys predicting that the Vikings were going to win the NFC North. I was like, nah, absolutely not. It's only the Packers. It's always the Packers. Tell you what, I'm ready to roll back on that already, because that Vikings team looked awesome. And where do they come week 2? To Philadelphia Monday Night Football. That's going to be a real tasty one, that is.
It will be indeed. We're going to get on to looking at week 2 very, very shortly. But what we'll do, we'll stick those 3 overreactions for our Overreaction Monday up on a Twitter poll. Get involved. Tell me in the comments that I'm completely crazy. Give us your overreactions to week 1 as well. It's all a good bit of fun, isn't it? Because, as you say, we'll be sitting here in 3 weeks' time. Aaron Rodgers will have thrown 15 touchdown passes, and all will be right with the world. But we shall wait and see what actually does transpire. Let's whiz through the rest of the scores that we haven't mentioned from the games that we just haven't yet talked about through the conversations that we've had. Seems a long time ago now, doesn't it, to go all the way back to the season opener, Thursday Night Football. But again, talk about a statement win. Buffalo 31, the Rams 10. Statements from both sides here, really. Very positive from Buffalo. And again, Josh might want to press his panic button in LA, because there was certainly an awful lot of questions that needed answering there.
Not yet.
Yeah, we mentioned New Orleans 27-26 over Atlanta. The story really, Atlanta throwing away yet another double-digit lead in the fourth quarter as the Saints come all the way back to pinch it on a Will Lutz field goal as time expired. Another game-winning field goal was Cade York in Cleveland, or at Carolina for Cleveland, 58-yarder for the rookie on his debut. That was his 4th of the day, as the Browns just about edge out Baker Mayfield's comeback, 26-24, the Browns beating Carolina. San Francisco, oh dear. Yes, it was played on a lake. Yes, I'll tell you what, you said earlier, if you had a new fan into the sport watching yesterday, that you'd have had a fan for life. If you had a new fan yesterday watching that game, trying to explain them how on earth that game was allowed to continue to be played. Lovely celebrations at the end. But Chicago winning it 19-10. I'm going to pause there to bring Josh in, because he's dying to make a point. Go on, mate.
God, doesn't Trey Lance look awful?
Yes.
All I could see from that, like, they didn't exactly go to that game a lot on red zone, but any time in which they did and San Francisco were on the ball, I know that it was basically played in a monsoon, and I know that it was played on and all the rest of it, but you look at Justin Fields against Trey Lance, just that, and Justin Fields looked like a perennial all-star against him. And that's Justin Fields. I do not have a high opinion on either, but, his mechanics are all off. He's, you can tell that he's having trouble reading the defense. And I'm still very unsure as to why San Francisco decided that this was the year to move on to Lance from Garoppolo. I still think that they should have let him do one more year under Jimmy G. And to be honest, if that's the sort of the initial stuff of which we see from Trey Lance, then it's going to be a difficult season for San Francisco. And what's going to make life even worse for them now is the fact that Elijah Mitchell is out for 8 weeks. That's heavy going. That is a punch in the gut after being punched in the face. So go on, Steve. I know you've been dying to get back at me.
I was just going to say, they've just let Trey Sermon go as well. They just cut
let Trey Sermon No.
Picked up by the Eagles, and now they're without Elijah Mitchell for 8 weeks. Like, ouch. But what I will just quickly say is, let's pump the brakes on praising that Chicago offense. In the first half, they were dreadful. But I'm the type of guy. Let's be honest; those weather conditions were awful. Like, that's a free hit for me. Like, that you can't expect anyone to play in those conditions. I don't know how that even went ahead. Like, they were literally scraping water off the field with brushes before the game began. Like, how that game even went ahead. How there was even touchdowns, I don't know. Like, wild game. But that's the type of thing we love to see. And yeah, I think to me it's a free hit. Let's see how he plays back in the sunny San Francisco, Levi Stadium, and see how it goes there. If he's the same again next week, then I'll be ready to push the panic button as well. But in those weather conditions, free hit for me.
Yeah, let's run through a few more. Kansas City probably in the blowout of the week, 44-21, and a few of those 21 points came in garbage time. Kansas absolutely battering Arizona. We've mentioned Tampa Bay and Dallas 19-3 to Tampa, Philadelphia 38, Detroit 35. Plenty of encouragement there, Steve, in terms of what you saw from the Philadelphia offense. They certainly can punch the ball in for the 1 yard line, right? That's for sure.
Yeah, 4 rushing touchdowns, one each for each of the 3 running backs, and 1 for Jalen Hurts. So quite a pleasing stat line for the rushing attack there. Really pleased with what I saw with AJ Brown. I said in the group last night, like, as a Philadelphia fan who didn't watch him all that much last year and his years in the league, I don't think I quite appreciated how good AJ Brown is. He's such a monster. He runs with so much power, and he's such yards after catch. Sorry, like he's got that ability to catch the ball even in coverage, and then get 5, 6, 7, 8 yards and extend the play, get the first down, move the chains. Like, he's such a good player. Alarm from the defense. Like, we shouldn't be putting up 35 points against Detroit, but a win's a win. You leave Detroit, it's a win. They were loud yesterday. That Detroit team, I think, is going to do better than some people are giving it. That pass rush was good. Jalen Hurts was given no time, and that's a good Eagles O-line. Like, a lot of people saying the number 1 O-line in the league, and that pass, they didn't really get to Jalen Hurts too much, but they weren't giving him any time at all. So that Detroit team will do better than a lot of people are giving them credit for this year. I think they are. They're limited by Jared Goff, but they will do okay this year. But yeah, positive for the Eagles. Get back with a win. Back to the link this week to host the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, looking forward to that one Monday night. Let's run through some more. Indianapolis, Houston, as we said, a 20 apiece tie. Indianapolis coming back in the fourth quarter to actually force overtime, and obviously that played out. Rodrigo Blankenship missing the chance to win it in overtime. New England 7, Miami 20. Statement win for the Dolphins, although they do seemingly own the Patriots these days, it would seem. Big win there. Green Bay 7, Minnesota 23. We've covered. Baltimore 24, the Jets 9. Fairly routine victory this for Baltimore. Joe Flacco throwing 59 times for the Jets. It's 2022, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Flacco still throwing 59 passes. Good Lord.
The Giants, Ben Roethlisberger, but worse.
Exactly, yeah. The Giants 21-20, as we said, but ballsy call from Daboll to go for the win, and it paid off. The Chargers got the big divisional win against the Raiders, 24-19. Justin Herbert looking just as good as advertised, 3 touchdown passes on the day. Jacksonville falling short against the Commanders, 22-28. And the only game that we haven't talked about, and I've deliberately left it till the end, fellas, is the craziness that was Pittsburgh 23, Cincinnati 20. And I've got to say, shout out to the boys from Who Day UK who had organised a fan meetup, as Josh alluded to, in Birmingham yesterday. There was a good bunch of Bengals fans in there, and we had some good conversations and some friendly banter, it's got to be said, between the two fan bases. We were all united in our hate of the Steelers, so it was all good. It was all good. But, fellas, what a crazy game. I mean, how on earth they turned the ball over 5 times and still should have won this game in regulation, still should have won this game in overtime, and ultimately still find a way to lose it. I mean, this was just crazy, wasn't it? And Steve, we've talked about him enough. Mike Tomlin just finds a way, doesn't he? And this, as much as anything, was a typical Pittsburgh win, wasn't it?
Yeah, gritty, hardworking. Defense never gave Jubber any time at all. Constantly pressuring the quarterback. The defensive backs were excellent. Just a classic Steelers performance. I think at defense. I said it before. We were talking about the Steelers literally last week. I said it before. That Steelers defense is good enough to win them games, and it did. That's exactly why they won that game. A stat I read just before we came on: the most games with 5+ sacks over the last 5 seasons is Steelers with 17. Next team is the Rams and Bucks with 13. So they just get after the quarterback, and that's what they do. They'll obviously be rocked with that TJ Watt injury. At the time of recording, we don't know how long he's out for. It sounds like it's going to be a torn pec, which sounds painful as hell. If he needs surgery, I've read that could be a season over. But if he doesn't need surgery, it's going to be 6 or 7 weeks or so. So either way, they're going to be without him for a big period of time. That is a huge loss to that Steelers front. And, whilst they do have a good, they've got a good unit anyway, losing TJ Watt is massive. That's 15 sacks a season, and the rest gone. So if they lose him, if he's gone for the season, that's massive. But yeah, like you said, statement, Tomlin win, exactly what you expect for the Steelers. But, great point from James there. At what cost? At what cost did that win cost the Steelers? Is that going to be them handicap for the rest of the season? But what I would just say about the Bengals is I love the grittiness and the determination from Joe Burrow. He throws 4 interceptions and is still slinging that ball. And Jamar Chase had a wonderful catch in the end zone. His touchdown catch was excellent, but also the catch that he was just out of bounds was an incredible grab. It's a shame it didn't count because he was literally millimeters from being in bounds with that second foot. But yeah, I love that grittiness from Burrow to keep slinging it. Don't be afraid. Don't cower away and go to the run. He just kept slinging it, and they were still successful and they should have won the game. They really should have. I don't think it was, to get 5. The thing is, the Steelers, they're not going to win the turnover battle by 5 every week, so they're going to have to find ways to win in other ways. But I don't think that's too much to concern for the Bengals.
Yeah, interesting, Josh. Just looking at it from the Bengals' perspective, obviously so much talk in the off-season. They went early into free agency to supposedly fix this offensive line. Yes, the Steelers are a good defense, as we know. 7 sacks, 11 quarterback hits on top of those 7 sacks. We keep saying it. Joe Burrow is not going to last if that's the kind of punishment that he's taking week in and week out. For as good as all the weapons are, and don't get me wrong, they're an incredibly talented group of weapons that he's got around him. I mean, in terms of that Jamar Chase catch, I mean, you could argue that it should have been probably challenged. To be honest, it was close enough, I think, to have thrown the challenge flag. I mean, obviously, I suppose all's well that ends well. They end up in the end zone a few plays or a few minutes later, but obviously, that was another mistake potentially in the game. It was just the Bengals getting in their own way in terms of this one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, any sort of game against the Steelers, you don't want to give them something early. The Steelers are the kind of team where if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile and then another mile, and that's exactly what happened here. They did all of their work early. They were able to build up a lead based on short yardage situations, and then just go from there. The Bengals were playing catch up, and the Steelers defense, if you are forcing them to pass, the Steelers secondary love that. They have the defensive line to be able to make sure that your passes are questionable, and then they've got the secondary to be the proper competition to go up for those balls. And that's exactly what happened here. Like you say, 7 sacks. It's the first time this offensive line has played, of which is a mitigating factor. But at the end of the day, you're paid millions to be able to block people coming through. It comes down to fundamentals, and they did not cover the fundamentals when it comes to protecting the quarterback. It's not a case of, I feel like you don't have to bed it in all too much, at the very least, to be able to just cover your edges. And they just didn't seem to do that at all. 11 QB hits, that's a lot of QB hits, especially for what is supposed to be, quality signings coming into this Bengals side. I have no doubt they'll be a lot better than this. I think that, realistically, the Steelers have one of the best defensive lines in football. So, they probably don't have to come under this kind of scrutiny as much either. So I think that they will get better as the season progresses. But, you've got to start protecting this guy. He's a perennial talent. And he's a perennial talent, and this is something as well. Kieran, thank you for bringing this in. 5 being Joe's fault, and that's kind of an issue as well, of which he had last year. It's something which I honed on about a lot last year, is that Joe is his own worst enemy when it comes to sacks. He did it far too much last year, especially towards the end of the regular season and the start of the playoffs. He, it might just be an experience thing. It might be that he just needs to stop being so courageous and actually throw the ball away. I think that with experience, that will end up improving. But for the time being, it just looks like that they get in their own way. This was no doubt a Bengals win today. I mean, yesterday, as long as they put the fundamentals in. To lose 5-0 on the turnover battle, Steve, like you say, and to be tied going into 1 minute 40 or so in at the end of overtime is, just showing the fact that the Steelers are clinging on by a thread, and the thread's flipping fraying at the edges and all the rest of it. But questions should be asked, and quite rightly too.
Yeah, it was certainly an entertaining game. Like you say, plenty of chances to win it for both teams. Ultimately, Boswell did nail the 53-yarder as time expired in overtime to pick up the win. So that's all of the results in so far. There's one game left, of course, though, tonight. Denver against Seattle. So Russell Wilson against his former team. That's the final game of the Pick'ems competition in week 1. Some bloke called Josh Henwood's leading the full 10 yards Pick'em League. I must meet him someday. He obviously knows what he's on about. But thank you for everyone that's joined. Make sure you get your picks in ahead of week 2, because that will very soon be with us, fellas, because we are starting things off, of course, on Thursday Night Football. Great to have that back, isn't it? And it's a good one this week as well, isn't it? Chargers and Chiefs kick off the week. But, fellas, give us a game that you're looking forward to throughout the week. It might be that one, I don't know. Josh, start us off. What game are you looking forward to in particular in week 2?
Stupidly enough, I put Chiefs Chargers, as it so happens. This one for me is the one that really is the one to circle, just because both teams have started off quite brightly. It's two great passing offenses going at it. The Chargers seem to have a wealth of talent now, and it's a case of, will they put that together into a team that can challenge? I felt like they had a really good start against the Raiders, tapered off towards the end, as we've seen with quite a few teams so far, whereas the Chiefs yesterday was just a crushing machine. They gave the Cardinals no quarter whatsoever. So I think you're going to see a really high-scoring game. I think you're going to see Mahomes and Herbert just slug it off together. It's not something which you see a lot of early season, passing offenses getting it done, but I think that we're going to be treated to that on Thursday night.
Yeah, it's certainly got the makings of a good one, hasn't it? And obviously we've talked a lot in this off-season about how competitive and tight that particular division is going to be. And how important these interdivisional games are. So, absolutely crucial for either of them to come out on the right side of it. But yeah, like you said, the Chiefs particularly impressive in week 1, weren't they? And obviously with home field advantage, they'll fancy their chances of getting it done. Steve, what game are you looking forward to, mate? You're going to pick Monday Night Football by any chance?
I have to. I really didn't want to. I wanted to try and find a team that wasn't my own. But I think that Monday Night Football game is such a tasty matchup. Eagles against the Vikings, both coming off wins, off impressive wins. Eagles because of the amount of points they scored, and the Vikings because they took down the mighty Packers. And the Vikings come into town as a early NFC North potential upset favorite to win that division. And I think if the Vikings do come away from Philadelphia with the win, they become the team to beat in the NFC North and potentially one of the NFC sort of top dogs. I know we're 2 weeks in; it's early to be talking about that sort of thing. But 2 impressive wins, is that what that would be? Whereas Philadelphia got business done in Detroit. It was ugly at times; it wasn't great, but they got business done. They left points on the field, and I think the Vikings probably the game should have been closer. We talked about how they should have conceded at least 1, if not 2 touchdowns, and they didn't because of the Green Bay receivers. So there's definitely points to be got out against that Vikings team. It'll be interesting to see how they handle a better offensive line, because that Packers O-line was hurt and was depleted, and obviously they had their fun with it. And I think the Eagles O-line will be a better test for them to see how that pass rush is working. But yeah, that I think it's going to be two passing offenses that are gonna dominate, and I think it's going to be decided on the ground. The Eagles' game is very different to the Vikings' game. The Vikings' game go to a strong, hardy Dalvin Cook who tears up yards on the field, whereas the Eagles spread the ball around and sometimes even just keep it with Jalen Hurts. So, real interesting one. I think it could be a battle of whoever can stop the run. But yeah, real test for both teams, and I think these two could be teams that will be there at the end in the sort of NFC final seven, and certainly could potentially both be divisional winners. I think whoever wins this game will be the favourite to win their division, I think.
Yeah, it's certainly a tasty one. Interesting scheduling quirk, isn't it? We've got a double header Monday Night Football, but the game's on at the same time, which is very strange because you've not only got Eagles Vikings on Monday night, you've also got Bills Titans on Monday night as well. Yeah, very strange. Yeah. Bills Titans kicking off an hour and 15 minutes earlier, so not quite sure what the league are doing there, but there you go. I'm picking out the Ravens and the Dolphins. I think these are two teams that are going to be in and around the playoff conversation come the end of the season. Potentially. I think I've made my view on the Ravens quite clear. I think they potentially will be the AFC North winners, but for a lot of people, these two teams are potentially division winners, but if not division winners, certainly going to be sneaking into wildcard conversations. So again, big important matchup. And they both had a relatively straightforward week one, so neither team necessarily have we got a handle on at this stage. I think they both had relatively straightforward victories. The Ravens obviously against the Jets and the Dolphins against the Patriots, who never seemingly got out of second gear. Really, really interesting matchup to see how good both of these teams are. I think there's quite a few good games on Sunday. We've got Saints and Bucks, another divisional battle, which will be a good one. Can the Packers get back on track there? The Sunday Night Football against the Bears, Jaguars, Colts in the AFC South. Can we get two ties consecutively for the Colts? I'd still love there to be no AFC South team with a win after 2 weeks. That'll be incredible. I'm willing that draw, although Steve says they should be outlawed. But look, it'll be great fun. There'll be plenty more chaos, more big plays, more missed kicks. It's what we love. It's great to have it back, isn't it? As we've said throughout the course of the week. Make sure you get your pick'em selections in. Follow Full 10 Yards throughout the week for all of your NFL and college football coverage. The team pumping out lots of great stuff now. The season is back, so keep your eyes peeled to all of the social channels to get all of your content throughout the course of the week. The three of us will be back, however, next week to review how week 2 all went down. Looking forward to it already, chaps. Like I say, week 1 in the books. It's been a blast. Let's do it again for the next 17 weeks. Sound like a deal, chaps?
Yeah.
Let's get it.
Until then, this has been the Full 10 Yards podcast, and we will see you soon.